Thank you. I'm pleased to be here on the official sweater day of the legislature. Thank you so much for that. At least Brad D. dressed appropriately over on the other side. I'm happy to be here with you. I also want to realize that this tradition has been here for a long time, well before I was in this body. But when I was in the House, well, let's face it, we have 50% more federal employees, federal elected officials than we had back then. So sometime you feel comfortable actually changing the process of what we do, I'd be more than happy to do something different in this particular way. But I appreciate the invitation of being here. I understand that with my presence here, we now complete the House. All 4 members of the House have been here. You still have not heard from the 2 senators. To it, I want you to know, I want you to join the club. We're still waiting for the U.S. Senate to do something as well, so grateful for that. Sometimes it's amazing for me to realize that Anne Boleyn was wooed, wedded, gave birth, and was beheaded in less time than it's taken the U.S. Senate to write their first budget. So, and hopefully, though, hopefully now that we have the no budget, no pay bill passed, we'll change that concept, and I'm especially wanting to change that concept because I'm not rich enough to live on anything else. I want the check coming in there. We have talked a great deal, I think everyone does, about the what's called the stagnation or the stalemate that is in Washington. I want you to know in real numbers that it is not so much a Republican-Democrat stalemate in Washington as it is a Senate-House stalemate in Washington, which means I'm not putting all the blame on Harry Reid. So let me go on with that. I am pleased that in the last couple of sessions we were able to pass half dozen bills that were helpful in there. Some of them were for land exchanges that have given part of the federal estate to local governments. We did some that helped summer recreation programs on federal lands, passed a bill that dealt with endangered species mitigation up in the upper Colorado, a couple of bills that actually prohibited some of the spending. So things are actually getting done. It's amazing what you can do when all you need from the president is a signature, and I'm happy to be there. We are not as efficient and as effective as you guys are. I realize that the state legislature is far more productive than we are, but then you guys don't have to deal with New England, and I do, so be happy for that one. I'm appreciative of what you're doing. There are some of the initiatives that are taking place here. I want to especially thank Senator Stephenson, Senator Adams, for what you were doing with the Utah Defense Alliance and your concern for the largest employer up there in northern Utah and for how you are moving forward with that. I'm also appreciative, okay, did I say the magic word? I'm also, at least the lights didn't go out this time, right? I'm appreciative of the governor for coming up with a recreation initiative that shows that actually energy production and recreation can coexist. They are not mutually exclusive. I think that's looking well. You know, in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, and communism collapsed. And the entire world realized that large centralized bureaucracies are not the solution to the problems that we have. The entrepreneurial world learned that. The Eastern Europe world learned that. Everywhere except Washington, D.C., where we still have people that think that you have a large centralized bureaucracy, you can solve the problems, and that's the only way of solving problems back there. That's part of the difference that's part of the problem in which we come. It's part of the problem in which we are trying to break the molds of what happens in Washington. You realize conventional wisdom will always tell you that the only place that you'll find a broad vision of what America needs is in Washington. Conventional wisdom will always tell you that if there's ever a conflict between state or local desires and the national desires, the federal government should win. Conventional wisdom sucks. The West does not need to be saved from itself. It never has, and it probably never will in the future. And it's time for us to move forward. And I'm appreciative of the efforts that the state legislature has done to give us the tools to move forward in that particular direction. If I could just spend 1 second here talking about sequestration to you. For me, the issue of sequestration is significant because it deals with the defense of this country and what would happen if you hollow out that defense of this country. You guys have a different approach to it. You're looking about what happens to the people who work in our defense industries and the job loss that would be there and what it would do to them as individuals, as well as what it would do with lost revenue that comes in if indeed sequestration goes through. This plan came out of the Obama administration. That was a budget director that insisted upon the sequestration idea. I was actually surprised because leading up to the campaign election, Department of Defense was told not to plan for sequestration. And indeed, the President in his debate said there would be no sequestration taking place. I actually thought that would be the case. Now it looks like we may be on the verge of doing something about it. Now, once again, the House passed 2 bills that would have solved the problem of sequestration, both on a bipartisan basis, and both of them ended up on Harry Reid's desk. Not that Harry Reid is the roadblock. And last Friday, we also passed, and I co-sponsored a bill that was a bicameral bill that came from both the House and the Senate Armed Services Committee that once again would be a solution to this problem of sequestration. So I hope we can reach an effective approach to that, and it may be at the last minute just as the fiscal cliff negotiations took place. And that's actually one thing where you can help me. If you could help me identify some territory, I think preferably in the Wellsville Mountain Range, where we could rename it the physical cliffs, I won't have the problem with having the difficulty of saying physical all the time. I also can't say nuclear as well. I am opposed to any kind of new BRAC coming through, but there are people who are pushing that. I don't think we need a BRAC, but what we do need is to be prepared in that particular situation. That's where I want to say how much I do appreciate what you are doing in working with the Utah Defense Alliance and MIDA in coming up with solutions that we can do. It is extremely important. You have a problem with the Air National Guard and the amount of space that they need to fulfill their mission. You have a problem with the Army Reserve and where they are right now. Moving all of those to Hill Air Force Base would be something that would give your agencies the ability of having some space that they desperately need, as well as furthering the commitment of Hill Air Force Base if indeed a BRAC were to take place. The rail shop needs to be moved. In all of those areas, though, there are things that we can do if we would work together. If we could work together on a study that could come up with the solutions and the answers that we want before the federal government actually gets to that step, that would be a perfect solution to some nagging problems that would help state issues as well as federal issues all at the same time. So if you would look carefully at what you're doing with the future up at Hill, what you're doing with the future of military use, especially what's happening with the Utah Defense Alliance, and once again, I'm proud of what you've done in the past. I'm looking forward to what you'll be able to do in the future. I think that would be beneficial to all of us. With that, Mr. President, I realize you have a lot of things to do. I realize I'm keeping you from passing bills, in which case I assume I'm the new sifting committee over here in the Senate. But if there are any questions that you might have, I'll do my best to try to weasel my way out of answering them.
Thank you for taking a couple of questions. Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President. Congressman Bishop, thank you for your service on our behalf up in northern Utah. We've had testimony here at that podium that Hill Air Force Base may in fact be at risk. What's your assessment?
All things being equal, Hill Air Force Base has the kind of vast variety of programs that need to be there. All things being equal, all things being fair, we are down to 3 depots in the Air Force. That's what you need to run the Air Force program. Unless you cut the budget of the military to such a grave degree that we do really stupid things. There are a lot of people who want sequestration to go through on the left because they really do want to cut the military. There are some on the right who want it to go through because they don't realize this is not the first cut of the military, this is the 3rd cut during this particular administration has been in office of the military. That this administration has already cut $1.4 trillion from the military budget. If indeed that goes through, I don't know what the future may be. We may be forced to make some stupid decisions. But as for Hill Air Force Base by itself, the workforce there is so good. The kinds of things they do there are so varied and they're done so expertly that it would be dumb to get rid of it. But dumb things have happened when we put ourselves in a particular position, and I'm fearful that we may sometime in the future. That's why I would hope that you can do everything within your power to try to be prepared if indeed that day were to ever come forth.
Senator DeBackus.
Congressman, welcome home. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. You always make me laugh, and I appreciate that in politics.
But Brigham City's home. Just
last year, the legislature passed a bill, and the governor signed a bill that required the federal government to turn over 30 million acres of land back to the state by December 31st, 2014, or else there's $3 million set aside to sue. I'm wondering how those negotiations are going with the federal government. Are we close to any kind of a deal?
There are multiple tracks in which you can reach that, and yeah, we are working through those processes. Look, the bottom line is Utah is a public land state. It will always be a public land state. The question is who will be in charge of the decisions made on that public land. Should it be people in Utah making those decisions, or should it be somebody a 4-hour flight away from here making those decisions? And that's why what you did with 148 from the House last time was the right approach. It's the right way of going forward, and I appreciate your efforts with that. There are other ways also in making sure that Utahns can have a greater say in what is taking place. I even appreciate your resolution, kind of, because if anything, it simply said that the federal government should not take unilateral action. This should be done by Utahns making decisions about Utah's future. So you're starting in the right direction. It's going to take a long time to change a lot of concepts that people have developed over the years, but we're moving forward. We're moving forward properly.
Senator Stephenson.
Just a quick comment. I've worked closely with Congressman Bishop for quite a few years, and I'd like to thank him. He's not just strictly a Hill Air Force Base guy. He'll work with you on transportation issues, lands issues, doesn't matter what it is. And he does this amazing job, I think, representing the state of Utah back in Washington. And as you can tell, he's one of the real common sense individuals back there, and we need to make sure he stays there. So appreciate you, Congressman, and very much. And thanks for keeping Hill on the radar. I think we had a study a few years done that if that closed, I don't know whether most of us in this room would ever see us back in northern Utah, our economy bounce back to the levels they are now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Is someone writing that down, and can I have it read at my funeral? I appreciate that very much.
We'll have one more question. Senator Dayton.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Congressman, for being here. We always appreciate your coming. Your presentations are far from boring, and we always appreciate you being available to us. Of course, we are supportive of your efforts on Hill, and coming from an Air Force family where I grew up in an Air Force family. My husband and many family members have served in the Air Force. We're grateful for that. But my question, not surprisingly, is on education. And I would just like you to give us your perspective on the Common Core and your recommendation to the states.
You know what I said earlier when the Berlin Wall came down and everyone realized that large centralized bureaucratic agencies are not the best solution to our problems? That still is true. And that sometimes when you actually have freedom and the ability of decentralizing decisions, you come up with better decisions in the long term. What I fear is taking place with this administration in dealing with education is the Common Core is being used as a hook to try and get everyone involved in decisions that will be controlled and directed from the Department of Education back in Washington, D.C., a large centralized bureaucratic administration. That's the biggest fear I want to. What Utah does as far as its own curriculum development should be Utah's decision. And as long as Utah has the flexibility of doing what Utah wants to it, and when I go back in the classroom, as long as I have the flexibility to do what I actually want to do, then you've got a system that has the chance of actually expanding and becoming innovative and creative. If we move into areas in which you give greater control over that process to Washington and greater control to a federal Department of Education, then you are inviting problems down the line. I think we've seen that in the past with other programs that have come out of Washington that simply invite the federal government to do a good classic bait and switch with the states. That's a fear that I do have, and I think it's a fear that you should take literally and to take seriously and look very carefully about how you're moving in that particular direction. The one thing that can actually move education forward is allowing people to be creative enough to come up with new ideas and think outside the box. That doesn't come with the directive that comes down from Washington, and that's the biggest fear I have as you go forward with this program. Once again, what you do what you want to do. You were the biggest leader in the fight against No Child Left Behind, which was another effort of the federal government to try and dictate what would happen at the state level. It's the wrong approach. I don't want us to do something that's even worse. I want us to make sure that we're looking philosophically about where we're going in the future. And I say that as an old teacher that wants freedom more than anything else when I'm in the classroom.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take one more question. Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I knew you when you still had color in your hair.
I remember you when you refuse to wear a tie then also. I'm just wondering, do they let you on the floor of Congress without a tie?
Well, I can't answer that. Are we on the record or not?
Thank you.
Just say there are ways of getting things done that don't have to go with, if you think outside the box and can be creative.
And that's where you've been, outside the box all along, right? Thank you. Congressman, I wanted to do a follow-up on the last question that was asked you. Is it my understanding that you're telling me that the administration is tying money to Adopt Core in all of the local school districts? That's not the message that I'm getting from the school districts who adopted it.
Yes.
Would you explain?
Now, it simply is one of the hooks that they want. They're trying to get you to buy into this. Now, if you just bought into Common Core on your own and didn't use anything the federal government is giving you, i.e. buying out of No Child Left Behind in exchange for this, then you give them no hook that they can use you in the future. But if you actually go through their program in which you buy into their waiver of No Child Left Behind, which, by the way, he doesn't have the power to give you in the first place, if you bought into that as well as adopting Common Core, then you've given them the hook that they can use in the future. And yeah, there's a concern. You should be concerned about it.
So you built that into the budget?
No.
Okay. It's discretionary money on the president's part?
Pardon me?
It's discretionary money on the education's part?
Everything that they've done so far with Common Core and Race to the Top has been from money that was already there in the department. In fact, one of the problems that you have, and one of the reasons we do need to have a budget and an appropriations bill going through, is if you only have a concurrent resolution, the president has a great deal of flexibility from moving budget money from one budget pile to another budget pile. So far, everything they have done has been done with the stimulus money they have, and there is nothing on the table right now that would replace that's going through the appropriations process.
And the stimulus money, though, was allocated by Congress?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not by me, but by Congress, yeah.
Well, that's what I mean, the greater voice of the body always rules. That's one of the lessons you taught me.
Unless they're wrong, but that's okay. Yeah.
Even when they are wrong, sometimes the majority is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Congressman. We appreciate you being
Can I
here.
just, before you do anything else, just let me say, as I have told before, and your constituents don't really understand this, the kind of transparency and the open process that is done in the Utah State Legislature puts us in Washington to shame. When I've been on the transition teams, I have tried to push for ideas and concepts of how we can do our work better in Washington, modeling it after what you do here in the state of Utah. So I do want you to know that I am very proud of everything you do. I am proud of the service that you give to the state of Utah. I'm proud of how you sacrifice for the state of Utah, regardless of what you actually want to come up with. I am proud of how you accomplish those goals, and I want you to know that I appreciate you as a citizen of the state of Utah, of what you do here, and I think the entire state should be proud of this state senate and your efforts. So I just want to say thank you so very much for what you are.